Hello to anyone who may be watching this video. If you're my players, go away. I am a hobbyist writer and I like to run Curse of Strahd. I say that what I mean is I am enjoying running my Curse of Strahd game. I will not run another one. And yeah, um, I decided to write and record some entries to expand upon the Tome of Strahd in my lore. This is actually my second time recording this video because my microphone was not on the first time, so I recorded the whole thing and none of it was recorded. So forgive me if I sound a little rushed, um, but I'm just trying to have a good time here. I don't do this for, I'm not paid to do this. I just do this for fun, just chilling on my day off. Decided I'd make a video for anyone who actually may watch these entries or stumble across them and get a kick out of them. Um, this video is just going to talk about some context and lore and information that you might want to know going into these entries. But first off, feel free to use these entries in your game if you want. You can exclude any of the entries that you don't like. Most of them are pretty self contained, so I don't think you're going to suffer very much if a previous entry is excluded. Although it may remove some necessary context to explain Strahd's mentality. So these are all non-canon entries to the Tome of Strahd, written and recorded by me. I'm a Curse of Strahd DM, and I did this for my players mainly. So I decided that, hey, I really like this Tome of Strahd, and I was kind of upset when I found out that there was only one page. And I understand that they couldn't write like a whole thing, and I wasn't just going to read like the whole I Strahd novel to them because that would be really weird, right? Like, hey, go read the I Strahd novel, players. Like, that's homework, and that's also weird, and it has a lot of spoilers as well. And also, the fifth edition adventure doesn't use that lore, so it would just not work. The whole point of this is that I made these Tome of Strahd expansions to basically let the players learn about Strahd and Barovia as the story goes on without lore dumping them with boring exposition, or Strahd just comes and gives a long speech, or I just tell them, hey, you see this area, here's its lore. Like, it just felt weird if I did that kind of stuff. So I decided to write all of this from the perspective of Strahd. These are all written by Strahd, which means that he has his own unique perspective on the events that are going. They are biased, they have narrator bias, which is important to keep in mind as you go for the adventure. As you go for the entries, that these are not exactly the events that genuinely occurred. These are just Strahd's perception of the events that actually occurred. And I also want to give some context that this the entries, although they are all written from the perspective of Strahd, they do heavily include characters like Tatiana, Sergei, and a character named Kamash, which we're going to get into a little later. But here are some changes that I made to the adventure and to the lore and to the context going into this. I've read the I Strahd novels, to be honest, don't have much of an opinion on them. Did not like how they made Strahd seem kind of shallow in them. Felt kind of psychopathically evil, to be honest. Also kind of creepy, in my opinion. Not in a good way, more of a this guy's a loser kind of way. Nowadays, we would use the word simp or incel. So he's got a lot of incel energy in those adventures or in those novels, and I didn't like that. I know that is applying modern lingo and modern beliefs to a historic character, but we are modern people playing a modern adventure. So there's going to be a few things that I just don't agree with. And that is also one of the reasons I made these entries. So that's a little bit of context to know going into why I may have done certain things that I did in these entries. But these entries are written at different points of Strahd's life. So keep that in mind. The first entry is written when he's only 15 years old. They're meant to be explored slowly over the course of the adventure, as I said before. They're meant to add depth to Strahd and make his fall to darkness a bit more understandable. But I want to make it clear that this isn't meant to justify anything that Strahd does. He was never forced to make the choices he made in my adventure, and he either chose them out of desperation, ignorance, or because he was occasionally manipulated. On that last topic, there are a few times that in these entries you're going to see that Tatiana isn't portrayed as the bastion of purity that she is in the novels and the fifth edition lore. She actually manipulates Strahd a few times, either out of pity for him, fear for his safety, or fear for her own safety. And as you'll see in the entries, Strahd makes his love known for her pretty early on, which becomes pretty important for their life. Firstly, Strahd was not named Strahd until he became a vampire, which doesn't happen until my 11th entry. So entry 1 through 10, or actually more accurately 2 through 9, or sorry, 2 through 10. He is Valeris von Zarevich. That is his birth name, and that is the name he has for most of his life. Well, his mortal life, I should say. He, in the first entry, he's only 15. He's not a member of the royal family. The von Zarevich clan are just lesser nobles. He meets Tatiana when they're both pretty young, like they're teenagers. And she is also a lesser noble, which is important for her characterization. She's not a peasant like she is in the common adventure. They do not meet after Strahd's conquest. They meet when they're very young. There are many other changes, but those are the big foundational ones that we're going to see a lot of that are going to kind of set the stage for everything beyond that. In regards to Tatiana, I have to kind of begin with a trigger warning because as of my 4th entry, I believe, Strahd described Tatiana and Sergei as being as courting. And I vaguely did the math at the time. She and Sergei are together. Strahd is around 29. Tatiana is around 26. Sergei is only about 16, according to my rendition. This was not intentional slander on my part to kind of make Tatiana look bad. This was just kind of a consequence of the timeline change that I made. That being said, I don't really feel obliged to change it, mainly because I described them as courting, but that doesn't mean that they're together. Courting just means Sergei has a crush on her. He has made it known that he wants to be with her, and he has taken strides to try and convince her to basically date him and be with him. That does not mean that they are together. So, just going to make it very clear, it's pretty much purely platonic on Tatiana's end at this point. Although she does eventually get with Sergei, but he is much older and much more of an adult, much more understanding and consenting at that point. This is not meant to be like Tatiana's a predator. No, that's not what I was trying to say. That's not what I meant, and that's not what is happening. But and you might want to tell your players that too. If they're like, wait a second, isn't Tatiana like 10 years older than Sergei, and isn't Sergei like 15 or 16 years old? You might want to just be like, they are courting, which just means that they want that Sergei wants to date her, but they are not dating. And yes, as I said, they do get together again, obviously, but they are not together at that point. Very important distinction. Although Strahd takes it very seriously when he hears that they are even just courting each other, or that Sergei is trying to court her. Some small details. I call vampires blood fiends in my setting. So whenever you hear blood fiend in one of the entries, just know that means vampire. Strahd is the vampire. He is the only one. And that is because he is the champion of vampire. Yeah, that's that. The brides of Strahd I made have a much bigger role. They don't really come up in the entries, though. I think they come up in the final entry. Ludmilla does at least. I don't even think Valant or Anastasia are mentioned at all. They're way more important in the campaign, but I don't think they're very important in the entries. But just know that I did expand on them. But since they're not really relevant to the entries, I'm not going to go much into them. Strahd, or rather Phalaris, does fall out of love with Tatiana at some point during the entries, but he does fall in love with her again. So if you're around the entry, I think 6 or so, or 9, or sorry, 6 or 7, and you're like, hey, is Strahd not in love with Tatiana right now? What's going on? Why is he acting this way? Yes, he actually is just he becomes depressed for reasons I won't get into. And he just doesn't think about love at all during that time. He has a lot of things that he's going through in his own head, but he does eventually fall in love with her again. And that's kind of when his obsession really begins. Although you'll see that he's obsessed throughout the entire entry, not all the entries, but it gets violent after that point. I used the Free Fanes of Barovia expansion. You'll have to forgive me. I really do not remember if the original was made by Mandy Mod or Dragna Carta. I generally couldn't figure it out online. Regardless, I am using the Dragna Carta version, where the ladies free are guardians of nature bound to certain locations. I like that one a lot better. This is relevant to, I think, entry 7 or so, um, because Strahd binds himself to the land of the Ladies Free, or to the power of the Ladies Free, and becomes the land before he is the vampire. So he's not a vampire at that point. So even before he made his pact with vampires, Strahd was the land, and he became the ancient later when he made his pact. Thus, he is the land, he is the ancient. But this did not happen at the same time. He had power over the land of Barovia, literally like the environment and the ground and the earth and the wind and its animals, before he was ever the vampire. He just had that. In my setting, you are either born with the ability to use magic or you are not. And those that are born with it are called Nasaborn. Strahd is not a Nasaborn, which means when he and Kamash meet, he's kind of jealous of Kamash. Kamash is a spellcaster, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Um, and Strahd is like, hey, I want to use magic. How do I do that? And Kamash is like, you can't. So when Strahd becomes the land and he gains the ability to control magic, basically, that is a huge deal for him. And as you'll see in the adventure, that's kind of what makes him and Kamash so close, is when Kamash gives him that power. A character who's really important to the entries is Kamash. And Kamash is the combination of Kazan and the Lich Escaphanter in the normal 5th edition adventure. I combined those two characters and made them one character named Kamash. And I gave him a lot of tie-ins with Strahd and his backstory. He eventually becomes Strahd's best friend. He teaches Strahd all about magic. He builds. He's the the architect for Castle Ravenloft, and the two of them go on adventures together. He helps Strahd bind the ladies free to the land, making Strahd the land, as it were, and he just becomes a very important person in Strahd's life. Spoiler, he does eventually become the Lich in the Amber Temple. So he is both the creator of the tower in Chapter 11, Van Richten's Tower, and then he eventually becomes the Lich in whatever chapter the Amber Temple is. So those are the same character, the same story, and they're mentioned a lot in Strahd's backstory. So if your characters ever meet Kamash, or I guess this can go vice versa. If your characters meet Strahd or Kamash, they might mention the other, especially Kamash. If you meet Kamash and you bring back his memories, he speaks quite fondly of Strahd, actually. Most of his memories of him are from when he was Phalaris. He actually might just refer to Strahd as Phalaris. He might even not know who Strahd is, although that's not entirely accurate. He would know who Strahd is, he just maybe doesn't really know what he's done and why people think he's a bad guy. He remembers him mostly as Phalaris, his good buddy, his best friend, and so on. The area which Barovia existed before becoming a domain of dread was called Circia. This is a country, not a region. This is where Strahd, Sergei, and Tatiana were born, and so on. Like in the original lore, Barovia was somewhere Strahd conquered and named after his father Barov, and he built Castle Ravenloft there in honor of his mother. I do try and leave these entries vague enough whereas you can kind of fit in your own lore, like what was Barovia called beforehand. I leave it up to you. So I'm not trying to explain everything when it comes to the lore. There are some things I have to explain to make sense for the entries. But within the realm of the entries, and like I said, you can always exclude one if maybe the Amber Temple entry is like, this really isn't how I plan to run the Amber Temple. By all means, you can just completely cut that one out. I'm sure I'm missing a few things. I do think the entries did a pretty good job contextualizing everything, if I do say so myself, that I think you'd want to know kind of before, just kind of having a basic understanding of Strahd as a character in the 5th edition adventure, which, if you're here, I assume you have both of those things. Lastly, though, a few music shoutouts. Heavily use RPG Music Maker's Curse of Strahd music and music by Lucas Quinn Creations. I'm going to have their links in the description. Heavily use their music for the entries. I do occasionally use copyrighted music, but these videos aren't monetized, and this channel is so small, I can't imagine that that's going to be a problem. But I might have to change some music every now and then, or my channel will just be deleted one day. Of course, all of this assumes that anyone is ever watching this video. So, maybe that's a little prideful on my end to even assume that this is relevant, but who knows? So that's pretty much it. Posted these videos on YouTube just so that my friends can watch them more conveniently. And if anyone gets a kick out of them, let me know. That'd be cool. If you don't like them, also let me know, but just don't expect me to engage in that. To rip off Matthew Colville, peace out.